What went right, what went wrong, and what the Boston Bruins can do to improve things moving forward.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Friday, May 24th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my dad jokes, hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren. We've been looking back at the season that was for the Boston Bruins after their second round playoff exit at the hands of the Florida Panthers 1 week ago today. And we've discussed the players' reactions, what the front office was saying, three big questions facing the Boston Bruins this offseason. And right now, we're just going to take another day to discuss what went right for the Bruins, what went wrong, and what they can do to address what went wrong here in the offseason. And when we're talking about what went right, I've said it all season long. The biggest reason why the Boston Bruins remained competitive despite losing the likes of Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, last year's trade deadline acquisitions in Tyler Bertuzzi, Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway. The biggest reason why they were able to remain competitive and one of the top teams in the Atlantic Division was the goaltending. The goaltending tandem of Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark in all situations this season ranked third in the NHL with a save percentage of 91.18, just shy of the Florida Panthers and the Winnipeg Jets. And both of those teams, I believe, have Vezina Trophy finalists on them. You have Connor Hellebuyck, Sergei Bobrovsky, and Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks, who will be in the running for the Vezina Trophy. The Bruins had the split tandem between Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark. Neither one of them jumped out as a nominee for that trophy, or a finalist, I should say. Connor Hellebuyck, Sergei Bobrovsky leading their teams to the top two save percentages in the NHL this season. At 5-on-5, the ranking remained the same. You had the Jets at 93.67%, the Panthers at 93%, and the Bruins at 92.98%. So just slightly below the Panthers, led by Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz, his backup this season. So when we're talking about what went right, there's no question that the goaltending was so key for the Bruins. And we heard them talk about this last summer, the fact that with all this transition, with all the changes, with the Bruins taking on some value contracts to plug some holes to stay competitive offensively, the priority was maintaining that goaltending tandem to offer that stability on the back end. And we saw through the course of the regular season that kind of shifted a bit when you saw, this team is still pretty good, and perhaps we should look to flip Linus Ullmark to make some additions offensively because that's one of the areas where they struggled a bit, and we'll discuss that coming up. But the fact that they were able to get top 3 goaltending from that tandem while both were on pretty good contracts, that definitely went right for this team. And that could be one of the areas of change coming up here over the next several weeks. Another thing that went right for the Bruins was their value adds. Danton Heinen, who began the season on a PTO, didn't even have a contract signed until after the regular season began. He and James Van Riemsdyk, among players with standard player contracts, so not guys on entry-level contracts. Among those standard level contracts, these two guys were top 10 in terms of cost per point here in the NHL this past season. Just fantastic value added in the top 9. Sometimes you're in the top 6. These guys stepped in early on. James Van Riemsdyk helped on the power play specifically. Danton Heinen came in, played up and down the lineup, and really provided great value for the Bruins at those positions. And then the third thing I wanted to mention as what went right was how the Bruins were able to maintain scoring depth down the middle. Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha ranked second and third on the team, respectively, with 60 points for Coyle, 25 goals, 35 assists, career highs for him. Pavel Zacha with 59 points, 21 goals, 38 assists. One of the big questions was whether or not they would be able to match up with the production that was offered last season from David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron. If you look back, Bergeron had 27 goals, 31 assists for 58 points. Krejci with 16 goals, 40 assists for a total of 56 points. Coyle, Zacha exceeding those marks for the Boston Bruins this season. So that definitely went right for the Bruins. The goaltending, some of these value adds, I should mention Kevin Shattenkirk. He was among, kind of down the list, further down the list, but he offered pretty good value. And then guys that were on entry-level deals or lesser deals like Mason Lohrei, Justin Brazeau, Johnny Beecher, those guys stepped up as well. And Cam Neely mentioning Beecher and Lohrei specifically the other day in terms of rookies that were able to step up for the Boston Bruins this season. So those are among the things that went most right for the Boston Bruins this season. What went wrong? Well, we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed. And Indeed is the hiring platform you need to complete your work team. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. And with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job descriptions the moment they sponsor a job, according to U.S. data from Indeed. Now, right now, you can start hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your post at Indeed.com/lockedon. This offer is good for over a limited time, but again, Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times more hires than other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. But if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. While you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today. All the latest news, opinions, and analysis from all over the Locked On universe. Locked On Sports Today is available free on YouTube and the Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, we discussed a few things that went right for the Bruins. What exactly went wrong? Well, in the regular season, they ran out of gas a little bit, and the Florida Panthers were able to overtake them for first place in the Atlantic. Would having to face the Tampa Bay Lightning in round one over the Leafs really have changed anything? Maybe not. The likelihood was they would have met the Panthers in round two regardless, and they certainly had their troubles with the Panthers in this series. The Bruins all season long were a poor possession team. We talked a lot about shot volume over shot quality. The Bruins at 5-on-5 during the regular season, ranked 12th among all NHL teams with a shot differential of 45.12. When it comes to shot attempt differential, they had a shot attempt differential of 24th ranked 47.03. So you can see here the Bruins regularly allowing more shots and more attempts than the opposition. Let me just check those shot attempt numbers once again. They ranked 23rd in that regard with a rank or a number of 48.26. So they were regularly out attempted, outshot at 5-on-5. When it comes to goals, though, they scored more goals than the opposition at 5-on-5, and they generated slightly more high danger chances than the opposition. So that's where the goaltending came in big. Ullmark, Swayman were able to stop high danger chances. The Bruins capitalized, and they had a better goal differential than their underlying numbers would have suggested. When it comes to all situations, again, the Bruins regularly out attempted and outshot. When it comes to shot attempts, they ranked 24th in that stat. In shots, they ranked they had a ranking of 22nd. So that could be a problem moving forward. The Bruins were bailed out a lot by their goaltending. If they next season continue to be regularly outshot and out attempted, there could be a bigger gap in goaltending quality from Jeremy Swayman and whoever his backup is, whether it be Brandon Bussey, who's never played in the NHL, or if they bring in a veteran goaltender to back him up in the event that Ullmark is traded. The gap between Ullmark and Swayman, very, very slim. The gap between Swayman and his backup could be much larger, and that's where these shot and shot attempt differentials could come to affect them next season. So while they talk about being a low volume team, one that creates more high danger chances than the opposition, they won't have the benefit necessarily of the high danger chances generated by the opposition being stopped as regularly if it's just Swayman and whoever else in net, as opposed to Swayman and Ullmark. So those underlying numbers need to be reversed. And if you look at the top teams, in shot differential, 3 of the top 4 are still in the postseason. The Florida Panthers, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Dallas Stars. When you look at shot differential, the top teams at all strengths in the NHL this season, the Florida Panthers, Edmonton Oilers were 3rd and 4th. Carolina Hurricanes were 1st. The Flyers, if you can believe it, were 2nd. If the Hurricanes had better goaltending, they could still be alive over the New York Rangers, who underlying numbers were not as good. And the Hurricanes kind of got goalied there in the second round by Igor Shesterkin. High danger chance differential. Again, the Oilers, number 1, Stars, number 2, Panthers, number 4, with the Hurricanes up there in third. So the Hurricanes maybe got a bit of a raw deal. Should have perhaps beaten the Rangers, but Igor Shesterkin came up big in that series. At any rate, you see how the importance of those underlying numbers and what they can mean to success. Another thing that went wrong for the Boston Bruins this season, we'll just say it in 2 words, Milan Lucic. That did not go well for the Bruins, and we just hope for the best for everyone involved in that situation. Another thing that went wrong, especially in the postseason, was just a lack of secondary scoring. The Bruins, that was something that Don Sweeney and Cam Neely both mentioned. They were led in scoring by Jake DeBrusk, who they could perhaps be letting walk here in free agency. He had 5 goals in 13 games. David Pastrnak with 4 goals in 13 games. There was a lot of focus on him in the postseason by the opposition. They need some guys to be able to step up and offer that secondary scoring. James Van Riemsdyk with only 1 goal in 11 games. Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha with 1 goal each in 13 playoff games. Charlie McAvoy with 1 goal from the back end. And then there were a bunch of guys who did not find the back of the net, including Jesper Boqvist, Danton Heinen. Pat Maroon played 13 games, did not score. Not that he's counted on to do that. So the Bruins, especially if Jake DeBrusk isn't going to be back, they need to increase scoring in the lineup, and they're going to have a big chance to do so with some cap space available this summer. Another thing that went wrong for the Bruins was just the fact that they were hamstrung cap-wise. They had $4.5 million in empty cap space that went to bonus overages for Krejci and Bergeron. That's a pretty decent player that you could have added with that money. Instead, it was just kind of floating out there. They had buyouts for Mike Riley that went against the cap that will still do so this coming season at $1.3 million. So that was working against them as well. They went all in and then some last season. Very limited assets to work with at the trade deadline this year, very limited cap space. And so altogether, they did pretty well with what they had working for them. Now, what will change? Well, there could be some big changes, as we've been talking about all week here on Locked On Boston Bruins, and we will discuss that here as the podcast continues. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and FanDuel is giving you a great chance to get in on the action. Winner take all time in the NBA. Celtics are rolling. NHL Final Four as well. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So right now, you can go to FanDuel, check out the NHL odds. And for example, tonight's Rangers-Panthers game, the over-under is set at 5.5. So put $5 on that. If you win, you get $150 in bonus bets to put on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. At FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So we talked about how important the goaltending was to the Bruins this season, some of those value adds that they made. We also talked about them, their underlying numbers not being quite as strong, and how they need to add some scoring because, as Jim Montgomery said, you can't win 2-1 every night in the postseason. So what is going to change? There's big questions about whether or not Jake DeBrusk will be back. I believe he wants to come back. I believe the Bruins would have him back, but there appears to be a pretty wide gap in terms of what he's looking for as a free agent and what the Bruins are prepared to offer, and he might be able to find more of what he's looking for elsewhere. So if he leaves, that opens up a hole that the Bruins need to fill on top of the needs that they already have, which they're looking to add down the middle, perhaps. On 32 Thoughts podcast this morning, Elliot Friedman says that Elias Lindholm is a guy that they're going to circle in on if he becomes available and does not resign with the Vancouver Canucks. Chandler Stevenson with Vegas is an option as well. Steven Stamkos would be a great add, in my opinion. Who knows if that will happen or if he'll remain with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But the money that would have been penciled in for DeBrusk could go to a center or a wing that they can add some scoring pop to the lineup. One of the things that went wrong as well, or what worked against them, was a lack of speed. Losing DeBrusk will only magnify that, and they'll need to add a winger who can bring some speed as well. So that could be a change for sure. Jake DeBrusk, no longer a member of the Boston Bruins. Linus Ullmark also could no longer be a member of the Boston Bruins. Jeremy Swayman is due a very fat payday and well-deserved. Ullmark has 1 year left on a contract that will pay him $5 million, which is a very reasonable contract. But if you couple that with, say, a $6, $7, $8 million deal for Jeremy Swayman, paying your tandem that amount becomes a bit untenable, especially when you do have needs elsewhere, notably down the middle, on the wing, and perhaps the left-hand defensive spot as well. Because after Lindholm, you have Lohrei, Witherspoon, pretty thin, and you might want to add some depth there, somebody in the top four. The Bruins will be aggressive in free agency. Don Sweeney has already told us. There are quite a few prominent, notable free agents who will be available to sign. The trade, if Ullmark is traded, that could simply be for picks, prospects. That cap space could be allotted elsewhere. And that was, there was the talk of using the tandem, a goalie rotation in the playoffs. It ended up just being primarily Jeremy Swayman. So that money could have been better used elsewhere in order to add some scoring. When it comes to the most notable unrestricted free agents, you have Sam Reinhart with the Florida Panthers coming off a 57-goal, 94-point regular season. Steven Stamkos, still at 34 years of age, had a very nice 40-goal, 41-assist season. Jake Gensel, of course, will be very highly sought after. 77 points, 30 goals in 67 games between the Penguins and the Hurricanes this season. Who else could be available? Jonathan Marchessault would be a great Jake DeBrusk replacement, a guy who just won the Conn Smythe Trophy last season. You have some vets like Matt Duchene, Sean Monahan, who will be looking for new contracts. Shane Gostisbehere on the back end. Tyler Toffoli, Vladimir Tarasenko, Teuvo Teravainen. Martin Necas is a guy that's popped up in trade talks, and I believe it was Bell Fraser who noted that on the 32 Thoughts podcast this morning, there was perhaps some talks between the Bruins and Hurricanes at the trade deadline involving Ullmark and Necas. I mentioned Chandler Stevenson already. There's going to be a bunch of guys available. Max Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi, Brady Shea, Elias Lindholm, Anthony Mantha, Daniel Sprong, Anthony Duclair. Some real opportunities to improve the lineup and complement the core for the Boston Bruins. So there will be changes. There will be new faces. There could be some faces moving out. We know the coaching staff and management will remain the same. It's going to be a fascinating offseason, and coming up, we're really entering that phase of the podcast. We will be daily for the time being. The plan next week is to do some core player reviews and then bring you all the latest on the black and gold. So please do subscribe if you have not already, and stick with me here through the off season as we get ready for 2024-25. Thanks so much for checking out the podcast this week. Please do subscribe if you have not already, and we'll be back on Monday. Check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and Amazon Fire TV channels app. And have a great weekend, friends. Long weekend for all of you down south of the border, so enjoy that, please. And we'll talk to you again here next week on Locked On Boston Bruins.